The Outsiders, Day 6. I tapped the nearest grown-up. "What's going on?" "Well, we don't know for sure," the man said with a good-natured grin. "We were having a school picnic up here, and the first thing we knew, the place is burning up. Thank goodness this is a wet season, and the old thing is worthless anyway." Then, to the kids, he shouted, "Stand back, children. The firemen will be coming soon." "I bet we started it," I said to Johnny. "We must have dropped a lighted cigarette or something." About that time, a lady came running up. "Jerry, some of the kids are missing. They're probably around here somewhere. You can't tell with all this excitement where they might be." "No," she shook her head. "They've been missing for at least half an hour. I thought they were climbing the hill." Then we all froze. Faintly, just faintly, you could hear someone yelling, and it sounded like it was coming from inside the church. The woman went white. "I told them not to play in the church. I told them." She looked like she was going to start screaming, so Jerry shook her. "I'll get them. Don't worry." I started at a dead run for the church, and the man caught my arm. "I'll get them. You kids stay out." I jerked loose and ran on. All I could think was, "We started it. We started it. We started it." I wasn't about to go through that flaming door, so I slammed a big rock through a window and pulled myself in. It was a wonder I didn't cut myself to death, now that I think about it. "Hey, pony boy." I looked around, startled. I hadn't realized Johnny had been right behind me all the way. I took a deep breath and started coughing. The smoke filled my eyes and they started watering. "Is that guy coming?" Johnny shook his head. The window stopped him. "Too scared?" "Nah," Johnny gave me a grin. "Too fat." I couldn't laugh because I was scared I'd drown in the smoke. The roar and crackling was getting louder, and Johnny shouted the next question. "Where's the kids?" "In the back, I guess," I hollered, and we started stumbling through the church. I should be scared, I thought, with an odd, detached feeling, but I'm not. The cinders and embers began falling on us, stinging and smarting like ants. Suddenly, in the red glow and the haze, I remembered wondering what it was like in a burning ember, and I thought, now I know. It's a red hell. Why aren't I scared? We pushed open the door to the back room and found 4 or 5 little kids, about 8 years old or younger, huddled in a corner. One was screaming his head off, and Johnny yelled, "Shut up! We're going to get you out." The kid looked surprised and quit hollering. I blinked myself. Johnny wasn't behaving at all like his old self. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the door was blocked by flames, then pushed open the window and tossed out the nearest kid. I caught one quick look at his face. It was red-marked from falling embers and sweat-streaked, but he grinned at me. He wasn't scared either. That was the only time I can think of when I saw him without that defeated, suspicious look in his eyes. He looked like he was having the time of his life. I picked up a kid, and he promptly bit me, but I leaned out the window and dropped him as gently as I could, being in a hurry like that. A crowd was there by that time. Dally was standing there, and when he saw me, he screamed, "For Pete's sake, get out of there! That roof's going to cave in any minute. Forget those blasted kids." I didn't pay any attention, although pieces of the old roof were crashing down too close for comfort. I snatched up another kid, hoping he didn't bite me, and dropping him without waiting to see if he landed okay or not. I was coughing so hard I could hardly stand up, and I wished I had time to take off Dally's jacket. It was hot. We dropped the last of the kids out as the front of the church started to crumble. Johnny shoved me toward the window. "Get out!" I leapt out the window and heard the timber crashing and the flames roaring but right behind me. I staggered, almost falling, coughing and sobbing for breath. Then I heard Johnny scream, and as I turned to go back for him, Dally swore at me and clubbed me across the back as hard as he could, and I went down into a peaceful darkness. When I came to, I was being bounced around, and I ached and smarted and wondered dimly where I was. I tried to think, but there was a high-pitched screaming going on, and I couldn't tell whether it was inside my head or out. Then I realized it was a siren. "The fuzz," I thought dully. "The cops have come for us." I tried to swallow a groan and wished wildly for soda. Someone with a cold, wet rag was gently sponging off my face, and a voice said, "I think he's coming around." I opened my eyes. It was dark. "I'm moving," I thought. "Are they taking me to jail?" "Where?" I said hoarsely, not able to get anything else out of my mouth. My throat was sore. I blinked at the stranger sitting beside me. But he wasn't a stranger. I'd seen him before. "Take it easy, kid. You're in an ambulance." "Where's Johnny?" I cried, frightened at being in this car of strangers. "And Alice. They're in the other ambulance, right behind us. Just calm down. You're going to be okay. You just passed out." "I didn't either," I said in the bored, tough voice we reserve for strangers and cops. "Dallas hit me. How come?" "'Cause your back was in flames, that's why." I was surprised. "It was? Golly, I didn't feel it. It don't hurt. We put it out before you got burned. That jacket saved you from a bad burning, maybe saved your life. You just keeled over from smoke inhalation and a little shock. Of course, that slap on the back didn't help much." I remembered who he was then. Jerry, somebody or other, who was too heavy to get in the window. He must be a schoolteacher, I thought. "Are you taking us to the police station?" I was still a little mixed up as to what was coming off. The police station? It was his turn to be surprised. "What would we want to take you to the police station for? We're taking all 3 of you to the hospital." I let his first remark slide by. Are Johnny and Dally all right? Which one's which? Johnny has black hair. Dally's the mean-looking one. He studied his wedding ring. Maybe he's thinking about his wife, I thought. I wish he'd say something. We think the tow-headed kid is going to be all right. He burned one arm pretty badly, though, trying to drag the other kid out the window. Johnny, well, I don't know about him. A piece of timber caught him across the back. He might have a broken back, and he was burned pretty severely. He passed out before he got out the window. They're giving him plasma now. He must have seen the look on my face because he hurriedly changed the subject. I swear, you three are the bravest kids I've seen in a long time. First you and the black-haired kid climbing in that window, and then the tough-looking kid going back in to save him. Mrs. O'Brien and I think you were sent straight from heaven. Or are you just professional heroes or something? Sent from heaven? Had he gotten a good look at Dallas? No, we're greasers, I said. I was too worried and scared to appreciate the fact that he was trying to be funny. You're what? Greasers. You know, like hoods. JDs. Johnny is wanted for murder, and Dallas has a record with a fuzz a mile long. Are you kidding me? Jerry stared at me as if he thought I was still in shock or something. I am not. Take me to town, and you'll find out pretty quick. We're taking to a hospital there anyway. The address card in your billfold said that was where you lived. Your name's really Pony Boy? Yeah, even on my birth certificate. And don't bug me about it. I felt weak. Are the little kids okay? Just fine. A little frightened, maybe. There were some short explosions right after you all got out. Sounded just exactly like gunfire. Gunfire. There went our gun, and gone with the wind. Were we sent from heaven? I started to laugh weakly. I guess that guy knew how close to hysterics I really was, for he talked to me in a low, soothing voice all the way to the hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, waiting to hear how Dally and Johnny were. I had been checked over, and except for a few burns and a big bruise across my back, I was all right. I had watched them bring Dally and Johnny in on stretchers. Dally's eyes were closed, but when I spoke, he had tried to grin and had told me that if I ever did a stupid thing like that again, he'd beat the tar out of me. He was still swearing at me when they took him on in. Johnny was unconscious. I had been afraid to look at him, but I was relieved to see that his face wasn't burned. He just looked very pale and still and sort of sick. I would have cried at the sight of him, so still, except I couldn't in front of people. Jerry Wood had stayed with me all the time. He kept thanking me for getting the kids out. He didn't seem to mind our being hoods. I told him the whole story, starting when Dallas and Johnny and I had met at the corner of Pickett and Sutton. I left out the part about the gun and our hitching a ride in the freight car. He was real nice about it and said that being heroes would help us get out of trouble, especially since it was self-defense and all. I was sitting there smoking a cigarette when Jerry came back in from making a phone call. He stared at me for a second. You shouldn't be smoking. I was startled. How come? I looked at my cigarette. It looked okay to me. I looked around for a no-smoking sign and couldn't find one. How come? Why, Jerry stammered, you're too young? I am? I had never thought about it. Everyone in our neighborhood, even the girls, smoked, except for Derry, who was too proud of his athletic health to risk a cigarette. We had all started smoking at an early age. Johnny had been smoking since he was 9. Steve started at 11, so no one thought it unusual when I started. I was the weed fiend in my family. Soda smokes only to steady his nerves or when he wants to look tough. Jerry simply sighed, then grinned. There are some people here to see you. Claim to be your brothers or something? I leapt up and ran for the door. But it was already open, and Soda had me in a bear hug and was swinging me around. I was so glad to see him I could have bawled. Finally he set me down and looked at me. He pushed my hair back. Oh, Pony Boy, your hair. Your tough hair. Then I saw Derry. He was leaning in the doorway, wearing his olive jeans and black T-shirt. He was still tall, broad-shouldered Derry, but his fists were jammed in his pockets and his eyes were pleading. I simply looked at him. He swallowed and said in a husky voice, Pony Boy? I let go of Soda and stood there for a minute. Derry didn't like me. He had driven me away that night. He had hit me. Derry hollered at me all the time. He didn't give a hang about me. Suddenly I realized, horrified, that Derry was crying. He didn't make a sound, but tears were running down his cheeks. I hadn't seen him cry in years, not even when Mom and Dad had been killed. I remembered the funeral. I had sobbed in spite of myself. Soda had broken down and bawled like a baby, but Derry had only stood there, his fists in his pockets, and that look on his face, the same helpless, pleading look that he was wearing now. In that second, what Soda and Dally and Two-Bit had been trying to tell me came through. Derry did care about me, maybe as much as he cared about Soda, and because he cared, he was trying too hard to make something of me. When he yelled, Pony, where have you been all this time? He meant, Pony, you've scared me to death. Please be careful, because I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. Derry looked down and turned away silently. Suddenly, I broke out of my daze. Derry, I screamed, and the next thing I knew, I had him around the waist and was squeezing the daylights out of him. Derry, I said, I'm sorry. He was stroking my hair, and I could hear the sobs racking him as he fought to keep back the tears. "Oh, Pony, I thought we'd lost you, like we did Mom and Dad." That was his silent fear, then, of losing another person he loved. I remembered how close he and Dad had been, and wondered how I could ever have thought him hard and unfeeling. I listened to his heart pounding through his T-shirt, and knew everything was going to be okay now. And now I had taken the long way round, but I was finally home to stay. Chapter 7. Now there were 3 of us sitting in the waiting room to hear how Dally and Johnny were. Then the reporters and the police came. They asked too many questions too fast and got me mixed up. If you want to know the truth, I wasn't feeling real good in the first place. Kind of sick, really. And I'm scared of policemen anyway. The reporters fired one question right after another at me and got me so confused I didn't know what was coming off. Derry finally told them I wasn't in any shape to be yelled at so much, and they slowed down a little. Derry's kind of big. Soda Pop kept them in stitches. He'd grab one guy's press hat and another's camera and walk around interviewing the nurses and mimicking TV reporters. He tried to lift a policeman's gun and grinned so crazily when he was caught that the policeman had to grin too. Soda can make anyone grin. I managed to get a hold of some hair grease and comb my hair back so that it looked a little better before they got any pictures. I'd die if I got my picture in the paper with my hair looking so lousy. Derry and Soda Pop were in the pictures too. Jerry Wood told me that if Soda Pop and Derry hadn't been so good looking, they wouldn't have taken so many. That was public appeal, he said. Soda was really getting a kick out of all this. I guess he would have enjoyed it more if it hadn't been so serious, but he couldn't resist anything that caused that much excitement. I swear sometimes he reminds me of a colt, a long-legged Palomino colt that has to get his nose into everything. The reporter stared at him admiringly. "I told you he looks like a movie star, and he kind of radiates." Finally, even Soda Pop got tired of the reporters. He gets bored with the same old thing after a time, and stretching out on the long bench he put his head in Derry's lap and went to sleep. I guess both of them were tired. It was late at night, and I knew they hadn't much sleep during the week. Even while I was answering questions, I remembered that it had only been a few hours since I was sleeping off a smoke in the corner of the church. Already it was an unreal dream, and yet, at the time, I couldn't have imagined any other world. Finally, the reporters started to leave, along with the police. One of them turned and asked, "What would you do right now if you could do anything you wanted?" I looked at him tiredly. "Take a bath." They thought that was pretty funny, but I meant it. I felt lousy. The hospital got real quiet after they left. The only noise was the nurse's soft footsteps and Soda's light breathing. Derry looked down at him and grinned half-heartedly. "He didn't get much sleep this week," he said softly. "He hardly slept at all." Soda said drowsily. "You didn't either." The nurses wouldn't tell us anything about Johnny and Dally, so Derry got hold of the doctor. The doctor told us that he would talk only to the family, but Derry finally got it through the guy's head that we were about as much family as Dally and Johnny had. Dally would be okay after 2 or 3 days in the hospital, he said. One arm was badly burned and would be scarred for the rest of his life, but he would have full use of it in a couple of weeks. Dally will be okay, I thought. Dallas is always okay. He could take anything. It was Johnny I was worried about. He was in critical condition. His back had been broken when that piece of timber fell on him. He was in severe shock and suffering from third-degree burns. They were doing everything they could to ease the pain, although since his back was broken he couldn't feel the burns below his waist. He kept calling for Dallas and Ponyboy. If he lived... If? Please no, I thought. Please not if. The blood was draining from my face, and Derry put an arm across my shoulder and squeezed hard. Even if he lived, he'd be crippled for the rest of his life. You wanted it straight, and you got it straight, the doctor said. Now go home and get some rest. I was trembling. A pain was growing in my throat, and I wanted to cry. But greasers don't cry in front of strangers. Some of us never cry at all, like Dally and Two-Bit and Tim Shepard. They forgot how at an early age. Johnny crippled for life? I'm dreaming, I thought in panic. I'm dreaming. I'll wake up at home or in the church, and everything will be like it used to be. But I didn't believe myself. Even if Johnny did live, he'd be crippled and never play football or help us out in a rumble again. He'd have to stay in that house he hated, where he wasn't wanted, and things could never be like they used to be. I didn't trust myself to speak. If I said one word, the hard knots in my throat would swell, and I'd be crying in spite of myself. I took a deep breath and kept my mouth shut. Soda was awake by then, and although he looked stony-faced, as if he hadn't heard a word the doctor had said, his eyes were bleak and stunned. Serious reality has a hard time coming through to Soda, but when it does, it hits him hard. He looked like I felt when I had seen that black-haired Soch lying doubled up and still in the moonlight. Derry was rubbing the back of my head softly. We'd better go home. We can't do anything here. In our Ford, I was suddenly overcome by sleepiness. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and we were home before I knew it. Soda was shaking me gently. Hey, Ponyboy, wake up. You still got to get to the house. I said sleepily, and lay down in the seat. I couldn't have gotten up to save my life. I could hear Soda and Derry, but as if from a great distance. "Oh, come on, Pony boy," Soda pleaded, shaking me a little harder. "We're sleepy, too." I guess Derry was tired of fooling around, because he picked me up and carried me in. "He's getting mighty big to be carried," Soda said. I wanted to tell him to shut up and let me sleep, but I only yawned. "He's sure lost a lot of weight," Derry said. I thought sleepily that I should at least pull off my shoes, but I didn't. I went to sleep the minute Derry tossed me on the bed. I had forgotten how soft a bed really was. I was the first one up the next morning. Soda must have pulled my shoes and shirt off for me. I was still wearing my jeans. He must have been too sleepy to undress himself, though. He lay stretched out beside me, fully clothed. I wiggled out from under his arm and pulled the blanket up over him, then went to take a shower. Asleep, he looked a lot younger than going on 17, but I hadn't noticed that Johnny looked younger when he was asleep, too, so I figured everyone did. Maybe people are younger when they are asleep. After my shower, I put on some clean clothes and spent 5 minutes or so hunting for a hint of beard on my face and mourning over my hair. That bum haircut made my ears stick out. Derry was still asleep when I went into the kitchen to fix breakfast. The first one up has to fix breakfast, and the other two do the dishes. That's the rule around our house, and usually it's Derry who fixes breakfast, and me and Soda who are left with the dishes. I hunted through the icebox and found some eggs. We all like our eggs done differently. I like them hard. Derry likes them in a bacon and tomato sandwich. Soda Pop eats his with grape jelly. All three of us like chocolate cake for breakfast. Mom had never allowed it with ham and eggs, but Derry let Soda and me talk him into it. We really didn't have to twist his arm. Derry loves chocolate cake as much as we do. Soda Pop always makes sure there's some in the icebox every night, and if there isn't, he cooks one up real quick. I like Derry's cakes better. Soda Pop always puts too much sugar in the icing. I don't see how he stands jelly and eggs and chocolate cake all at once, but he seems to like it. Derry drinks black coffee, and Soda Pop and I drink chocolate milk. We could have coffee if we wanted it, but we like chocolate milk. All three of us are crazy about chocolate stuff. Soda says if they ever make a chocolate cigarette, I'll have it made. "Anybody home?" a familiar voice called through the front screen, and Tubit and Steve came in. We always just stick our heads into each other's houses and holler, "Hey," and walk in. Our front door is always unlocked in case one of the boys is hacked off at his parents and needs a place to lay over and cool off. We never could tell who we'd find stretched out on the sofa in the morning. It was usually Steve, whose father told him about once a week to get out and never come back. Kind of bugs Steve, even if his old man does give him $5 or $6 the next day to make up for it. Or it might be Dally, who lived anywhere he could. Once we even found Tim Shepherd, leader of the Shepherd gang, and far from his own turf, reading the morning paper in the armchair. He merely looked up and said hi, and strolled out without staying for breakfast. Two-Bit's mother warned us about burglars, but Derry, flexing his muscles so that they bulged like oversized baseballs, drawled that he wasn't afraid of any burglars and that we didn't really have anything worth taking. He'd risk a robbery, he said, if it meant keeping one of the boys from blowing up and robbing a gas station or something, so the door was never locked. "In here," I yelled, forgetting that Derry and Soda Pop were still asleep. "Don't slam the door." They slammed the door, of course, and Two-Bit came running into the kitchen. He caught me by the upper arms and swung me around, ignoring the fact that I had 2 uncooked eggs in my hand. "Hey, Pony Boy," he cried gleefully. "Long time no see." You would have thought it had been 5 years instead of 5 days since I'd seen him last, but I didn't mind. I like old Two-Bit. He's a good buddy to have. He spun me into Steve, who gave me a playful slap on my bruised back and shoved me across the room. One of the eggs went flying. It landed on the clock, and I tightened my grip on the other one so that it crushed and ran all over my hand. "Now look what you did," I griped. "There went our breakfast. Can't you two wait till I set the eggs down before you go shoving me all over the country?" I really was a little mad, because I had just realized how long it had been since I'd eaten anything. The last thing I'd eaten was a hot fudge sundae at the Dairy Queen in Windricksville, and I was hungry. Two-Bit was walking in a slow circle around me, and I sighed because I knew what was coming. "Man, dig Baldy here." He was staring at my head as he circled me. I wouldn't have believed it. I thought all the wild Indians in Oklahoma had been tamed. What little squaw's got that tough-looking mop of yours, Pony Boy?" "Oh, lay off," I said. I wasn't feeling too good in the first place, kind of like I was coming down with something. Two-Bit winked at Steve, and Steve said, "Why, he had to get a haircut to get his picture in the paper. They'd never believe a greasy-looking mug could be a hero." "How do you like being a hero, Big Shot?" "How do I like what?" "Being a hero, you know." He shoved the morning paper at me impatiently. "Like a big shot, even." I stared at the newspaper. On the front page of the second section was the headline, "Juvenile Delinquents Turn Heroes." "What I like is the turn bit," Two-Bit said, cleaning the egg up off the floor. "You're all heroes from the beginning. You just didn't turn all of a sudden." I hardly heard him. I was reading the paper. That whole page was covered with stories about us. The fight, the murder, the church burning, the socials being drunk, everything. My picture was there with Derry and Soda Pop. The article told how Johnny and I had risked our lives saving those little kids, and there was a comment from one of the parents who said that they would all have burned to death if it hadn't been for us. It told the whole story of our fight with the socias, only they didn't say socias, because most grown-ups don't know about the battles that go on between us. They had interviewed Cherry Valance, and she said Bob had been drunk and that the boys had been looking for a fight when they took her home. Bob had told her he'd fix us for picking up his girl. His buddy Randy Anderson, who had helped jump us, also said it was their fault and that we only fought back in self-defense. But they were charging Johnny with manslaughter. Then I discovered that I was supposed to appeal at juvenile court for running away, and Johnny was too, if he recovered. Not if, I thought again. Why do they keep saying if? For once, there weren't any charges against Dally, and I knew he'd be mad because the paper made him out a hero for saving Johnny and didn't say much about his police record, which he was kind of proud of. He'd kill those reporters if he got a hold of them. There was another column about just Derry and Soda and me, how Derry worked on 2 jobs at once and made good at both of them, and about his outstanding record at school. It mentioned Soda Pop dropping out of school so we could stay together, and that I made the honor roll at school all the time and might be a future track star. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm on the A squad track team, the youngest one. I'm a good runner. Then it said we shouldn't be separated after we had worked so hard to stay together. The meaning of that last line finally hit me. "You mean," I swallowed hard, "that they're thinking about putting me and Soda in a boys' home or something?" Steve was carefully combing back his hair in complicated swirls. "Something like that."